this morning we had quite an experience in the temple, and it made me think back to Swami Radha and her talking about she foresaw that there would be that kind of gathering in the temple, us going weaving in and out of the doors, and I thought it would have warmed her heart to see that happening today. And I realized that by doing what we did, we created an experience for ourselves that I'm sure every time we hear the word compassion for the next while, that whole experience will come back. And it just made me realize that when you want to take an idea and really expand it, by having some kind of experience that goes with it, and that we can make our own experiences, that was obvious by today, we really support that idea and give power to it. And I've been thinking a lot about ideas lately because I've been working with Patanjali's sutras. And Patanjali is this person who, in 300 BC, observed the yogis and the way they lived and wrote these short, very short aphorisms, some like 200 of them, about the yogic way of life. And there are two that have really been speaking to me. And one is at the very start, and he says that yoga is the control of the ideas in the mind. And he says that we collect ideas all throughout our life, and they sit in the mind, sort of like old furniture. You know, it's kind of, you don't know it's there, but it's there. Might be heavy. And they radiate an influence on our lives, in our lives. And we may not even be aware that they're there. And he says that if we don't control them, they will control us. And by control, it's not meant suppression or avoidance. It's meant guidance. So something in us has to find a way to guide our minds, which is what you've been working with a lot this week with the practices and Kundalini. And so he says that we often think that the ideas will help us think about something. They're really important. But in fact, if we look a little more closely, we get involved in kind of a mental drift. You know, one thing leads to another, and we're off down the lane kind of thing, which is no benefit to us at all. But if we concentrate and really focus on the idea, like we did with compassion, then it'll bring us closer to our intuition, which is full of inner guidance. That's where we want to be. And when I was sort of studying Patanjali and thinking about all this, I realized that I came to the ashram many years ago because I wanted help with controlling the ideas in my mind. I couldn't have said that at the time, but when I look back on it, I see that's absolutely what it was all about. And so what happened here is, for me, is what happens with everybody, is that I got tools to work with, and those tools really helped me with that sense of control. The other aphorism that I felt quite drawn to was Ahimsa. And you may well know about Ahimsa, the yoga of non-injury. And Patanjali says it's our highest duty. The yoga of non-injury is our highest duty. And it got me thinking, well, if I don't know the ideas in my mind, aren't I at risk of injuring out of ignorance, like without knowing it? I can react, I can say something that's mean, you know, it can come out really fast, I can be inconsiderate, on, because I don't really know what I think about something. And I think today I would equate Ahimsa with compassion, with where we were going with compassion, with the charter and listening to the wording there, that Ahimsa really means having compassion for others. And Swami Radha would say, and she does say in her little book, Yoga of Healing, which I like so much, She says that understanding is the key. It's the key to the ignorance, and it's the key to the compassion, and it's the key to ahimsa, non-injury. That once you have understanding, that then you can have acceptance, and you might even be able to have forgiveness in certain situations. And it reminded me of a time when I went in to see her, and I said, I don't remember who the person was now, but I said, I've tried to forgive, because she would say you have to forgive, like Jesus said, I think 70 times 7. I said, I've tried to forgive this person, and I can't. And she said, no, of course you can't. She said, because you don't understand what happened. Go away and try to understand what took place. And she said, I bet you'll be able to forgive. And I was just amazed at how well that worked, how well that went. So compassion and healing seem to be really linked. And if I think about yoga, I think that yoga is healing, and healing is yoga, like in the true sense of the word. And all through this little book, she talks about compassion, and how if you want to help heal someone else, you really have to have compassion. But if you want to help yourself, you have to understand yourself. And she gives us a little formula how to learn to be compassionate. I always like formulas. I'll pass it on. There's 4 points, and she says, observe yourself, practice awareness, reflect and ask questions, just like you've been doing in your 7 days, in order to gain understanding about yourself. And she says, when you see and forgive your own failings, you'll be ready to forgive other people, theirs. And then healing is possible. And compassion is possible. She says, compassion needs an open door of acceptance. This is along the lines of what Shivananda was talking about last night. That door will open through the light, the power of the light, and the very subtleness of the rays of light. And I'd have to say I learned a lot about compassion, understanding, and forgiveness from Swami Radha, just because she talked about them so much, but also she lived them in her interactions and her relationships with all of us. And she showed us how you can take an idea like that and it will really expand in your mind if you reflect on it, if you think about it, like we've been doing all week this week. And at the same time, she was able to convey to us how certain ideas in our minds were holding us back, were limiting us, and not letting us go forward. And I remember in particular one day receiving a phone call from her, and I'd been having a personality conflict with one of the people here, and this person and I were really trying to work it out. We were very sincere, but we were not getting anywhere. And Swami Radha just had this ability to sort of focus on an idea in the mind that wasn't working and replace it with something that might work very well. And it was always kind of a surprise what she would come up with. So on the phone she said to me, well, she said, how's your relationship with so-and-so? And I went, well, it's not doing great. We're both working at it. She said, look, she said, you should think of yourself as having $1 million in the bank. And this other person has $10 in the bank. Why don't you help her? And that just turned the whole thing around. Just thinking in those terms, and that idea that she planted, I've been able to use in other situations since that time. So healing, with healing, when I got Parkinson's, I thought I could probably heal it. But what's happened is that the Parkinson's itself hasn't healed, but there have been so many healings all along the way that I'm in very good shape. And had it not been for yoga, I wouldn't be very mobile right now. So that's a fact. So when we're working with healing as an idea in the mind, I think it's to really keep the mind open and not to say it has to look a certain way, but to allow whatever needs to be healed to come forward and see what happens with that, and then see where you take it from there.